So welcome to the Human Ecology of Racism, developing our theories of change, why healing for those who benefit from whiteness matters. And I'll invite us just to look at this poem for just a moment. That really helps us understand the ecology we're entering into. We want to support the fundamental relearning of power that adapts toward cooperation and relationship. We want to create a space to explore and embody and play into the paradigm we are yet to name. We want to value being and everything that consists of feeling, intuitive, reasoning, creating, thinking, and more. Carry us through. We want to encourage us to return to our radical wisdom that brings us to the roots and roots us in our regrowth. And her ask us to transform at all levels. At the same time, and as we always are, to do so more intentionally and with acknowledgement that we have many connections, relationships, and scales with which this occurs. So welcome to the Human Ecology of Racism. I want to start us with an excerpt that has informed some of how I approach this work. It's a slave woman's prayer from 1860 that's recorded by Stephen Hayes and printed in the Conversations with God by James Washington. And the first part of this prayer reads, "O Lord, bless my master. When he calls upon thee to damn his soul, do not hear him. Do not hear him, but hear me. Save him. Make him know he is wicked, and he will pray to thee." This doesn't speak to me from a Christian context, but it speaks to me from the place of what it means to be in literal servitude and cultivate enough compassion for the person holding you in bondage to not wish for someone's condemnation, but wish for their recognition and transformation. So these are words from 1816 or maybe even earlier. And I want to bring us a little bit further in time to the 60s.
Record. In another way, this dream, and we'll get to the dream in a moment, is at the expense of the American Negro. You watch this in the Deep South in great relief, but not only in the Deep South. In the Deep South, you are dealing with a sheriff or a landlord or a landlady or the girl at the Western Union desk. And she doesn't know quite who she's dealing with, by which I mean that if you're not part of the town, and if you are a northern nigger, it shows in millions of ways. So she simply knows that it's an unknown quantity, and she wants to have nothing to do with it. So she won't talk to you. You have to wait for a while to get your telegram. Okay, we all know this. We've been through it. And by the time you get to be a man, it's very easy to deal with. But what is happening in the poor woman, the poor man's mind, is this. They've been raised to believe, and by now they helplessly believe, that no matter how terrible their lives may be, and their lives have been quite terrible. And no matter how far they fall, no matter what disaster overtakes them, they have one enormous knowledge and consolation, which is like a heavenly revelation. At least they are not black. Now I suggest that of all the terrible things that can happen to a human being, that is one of the worst. I suggest that what has happened to white Southerners is in some ways, after all, much worse than what has happened to Negroes there. Because Sheriff Clark in Selma, Alabama, cannot be considered, no one can be dismissed as a total monster. I'm sure he loves his wife, his children. I'm sure that, he likes to get drunk. He's, after all, one's got to assume, and he is visibly a man like me. But he doesn't know what drives him to use the club, to menace with the gun, and to use the cattle prod. Something awful must have happened to a human being to be able to put a cattle prod against a woman's breast, for example. What happens to the woman is ghastly. What happens to the man who does it is in some ways much, much worse. This is being done, after all, not 100 years ago, but in 1965, in a country which is blessed with what we call prosperity, a word we won't examine too closely, with a certain kind of social coherence, which calls itself a civilized nation and which espouses the notion of the free world. And it is perfectly true from the point of view now simply of an American Negro. Any American Negro watching this, no matter where he is, from the vantage point of Harlem, which is another terrible place, has to say to himself, in spite of what the government says we can't do anything about it. But those are white people being murdered in Mississippi work farms, being carried off to jail. Those are white children running up and down the streets. The government would find some way of doing something about it. We have a civil rights bill now. We had an amendment, the 15th Amendment, nearly 100 years ago. I hate to sound again like an Old Testament prophet, but if the amendment was not honored then, I don't have any reason for believing the civil rights bill will be honored now. And after all, one's been there since before, a lot of other people got there. If one has got to prove one's title to the land, isn't 400 years enough? Record.
So for me, that particular testament from James Baldwin speaks to the value of a Black-centered insight into whiteness in the United States. That particular clip is when James Baldwin debated William F. Buckley in 1965, actually at an English university. And he began that debate by acknowledging how awkward it was for a Black person to debate the question of whether United States prosperity was at the cost of the American Negro, because it was so self-evident. So to me, part of what her offers as an ecosystem is not only a community of practice for folks who benefit from whiteness or in close proximity to whiteness, but it's also a space that comes from a Black point of view and who is organizing, collaborating, loving, and in deep relationship with folks who are closer to the proximity of whiteness, who are doing their deep work. So a few more things before we continue to enter and unfold into this movement. First, we're at movement 0. That was a very intentional choice. in many spiritual traditions, including the tradition of which I'm a part, the Conjure tradition of the United States. Zero means source. So even beyond the foundation for the rest of this series, please consider this space, the movement we create today, as the source of the ecosystem. And each space is also called a movement because in part, in classical movement, we understand each section to be self-contained, but also it's self-contained that forms a whole. And of course, it's fun to have some wordplay. And we are working in movements within our social justice movements. Let's further break this down a little bit. Why? I believe in this organizing power within this work of white people and people who benefit from whiteness healing themselves. In part because I've witnessed it, I've seen it, I've been impacted by it. And her wants to acknowledge that there are theories of change behind why that happens. It's not merely an individual event or interpersonal event. That there are many theories of change about why healing matters and why healing matters to transform white supremacy. And we'll get more into that today within the collective knowledge within this group. Healing. I do not believe that white supremacy ends until white people and those close to whiteness believe in their own deservingness to exist. It hails back to the statement of James Baldwin about what happens to the person who brands another, and what happens to the slave master who owns another human like a commodity. So I believe that if folks who are close to whiteness believe in their own deservingness, in their own wholeness, in their own completeness, that is transformative, not only at the individual level, but systemically. White supremacy's depravity comes from spiritual deprivation, or some might say moral deprivation. And that comes from a deeper deprivation. So the depravity comes from a lack, from an absence, from some disconnection. And no policy or campaign can change that. White. Her holds a point of view that to reach through white supremacy, we must touch white identified people, and also others who benefit from or are close proximity to whiteness. So that includes people with a white parent, people raised by white identified people, people who may not be raised outside the United States, but who in coming here assimilate into whiteness and have the ability to do so. And people like myself who grow up in predominantly white communities and become fluid in whiteness and can exist in white institutions. So when we talk about healing for white folks, it's actually a much broader ecosystem. I'll invite us to expand to live into that reality. And then finally, folks, her itself is a living ecosystem. So I often talk about her outside of myself because it is containing many relationships among humans, but also to other ecologies and other beings. And those of you who are joining us today, and hopefully onward, humans who populate her as an ecosystem are joining in a community of practice for willful adaptation. Clearly the world is changing. The paradigm is changing. And those who are choosing to practice together, to practice intentionally, and to practice toward the adaptation of this world in which whiteness and white supremacy may not exist in the same way, we welcome you. I'm holding the reality, the present reality, and not the future. That white supremacy is dying, it is decaying, it is something that we are living through at this moment. And whiteness, as we know it, is also dying too, within the American empire, which is crumbling. So this is an opportunity to practice co-creating another way of being. We are co-creating that together. So with that introduction, I'm grateful to introduce a dear friend and colleague, Rebecca Mintz, who's going to be sharing more about her experience and what leads her to her own theory of change about why healing is important for this work.
Thanks, Rochelle. Hi, everybody. Can you hear me okay? How's my sound? Cool. It's so wonderful to be here with you all. Honestly, I feel so grateful. And Rochelle, I just admire and love you so dearly, and getting to collaborate with you on this is so wonderful. So thank you for being here, and getting to collaborate with the broader HER team that you all will get to know over the course of the series has also just been such a joy. And it's cool to look over the screen and see some faces that I haven't seen in a long time, actually, and some folks that I've seen recently, and some folks I've never seen before. And so I'm just really overjoyed to be here with you all and to talk with you today about something that I care about so much, which is healing around whiteness. I just believe so deeply in the power of this work. I believe in it so deeply for myself, and how I have been going into this work for myself, the way that it's been transformational for me, and the faith that I have in the transformation for me to come over the years around whiteness, and how deeply I see it having value and meaning, not only for me, but for the people that I love, right? The change that I can bring to myself, how that can bring benefit to people around me, and that I really believe deeply that the more that white folks and white adjacent folks and those who benefit from whiteness, the more healing work that we can do, the more that we can contribute to movements for collective liberation. That is so important to me, that this is not just about benefiting ourselves, this is about benefiting the work of this world. So much for me, when I think about whiteness, I think about the way that it has, the dehumanization that it's brought to me. I think about it mainly through disconnection. It has been a force of disconnection in my life, a disconnecting me from my body, a disconnecting me from other people, a disconnecting me from spirit, a disconnecting me from earth. And I think I just noticed how deeply, when I looked around, when I was younger and looked around, it was like, I'm in this place where there's just such a lack of connection. What a loss for me and for my people, and a disconnection from ancestry and lineage. And so when I think about healing for myself, it's often about healing my reconnection with these sources of strength that can bring me into myself, bring me into relationship, and bring me into movement. And I think about, honestly, I think about whiteness as anesthesia. It's almost like an injection of like getting me not to feel the horrors of racialized capitalism so that I will stay complicit, right? And I think oftentimes both of those things show up in my body through elements of white supremacy culture. I don't know if you all have spent a lot of time with that idea or that document that was written a number of decades ago, but it's still so relevant, by Tama Okun and Kenneth Jones. That I think about white supremacy culture as these particular poisons that I haven't gotten addicted to, right? Because they make me feel superior. They make me feel some sort of better. And I think for a number of white adjacent folks, it's like we have particular ones that we've gotten particularly addicted to. And so for me, a lot of the healing is noticing, okay, which of these addictions have I gained? For me, a lot of it tends to be, I want to be the only one. I want to be the one on camera. I want to be the one talking. I want to be the one saving. I want to be the important one. That's a super addictive one for me. So noticing like, oh, how does that, not only noticing it like, oh, on a document, I'm the only one, learning it cognitively, but actually getting really familiar with how that poison feels in my body. When is it happening? How is it living in me? And then how am I bringing that into the room? How am I perpetrating that on other people? That then keeps me from being able to really be with other people in collective movement. So those are the things that I'm thinking about. And anesthesia, disconnection, white supremacy culture. how those things are all tied together, and how healing is about reconnecting to these sources of strength that get me centered, right? Earth, spirit, relationship, my body, lineage, ancestry, feeling myself to be part of a whole, of a human whole, how that can bring me into right relationship with myself, with other people, and then I can show up more right and with dignity and belonging in movements for social justice. So those are some of the things I'm working on. And I'm really grateful to get to be in community practice with you all, to be working on whatever it is that you're working on in your healing journey around whiteness. I get to be your MC facilitator for the day through the process for the next hour and a half, and I'm grateful for that. And the first thing that we're actually going to do is I'm going to pass it to one of my dear friends and collaborators, Julia, who Rochelle already asked to wave. Julia is going to lead us through, so this is where we're headed for the next hour and a half. Julia is going to lead us through a somatic practice, an embodiment practice, because one of the things so Caitlin and Julia and other folks and I are on the Surge DC, is Showing Up for Racial Justice DC healing team. And one of the things that we talk on that team about a lot is moving from head to heart and body. That's especially for whiteness, right? It often is teaching us to disconnect and stay in our heads. So we use a lot of practices of embodiment. This is something that's becoming more and more common in movement for social justice around the country, around the world these days, which I'm really grateful for. So Julia is going to lead us through an embodiment practice for all of us to get to go into our own experience about why are we here? Why do we care about this? Why do we believe? What is your theory of change about healing around whiteness for yourself? Then we'll come back and get you actually into pairs. So you'll get to chat with someone else, and we'll give you some guidelines and support about how to have that conversation. And then we'll all come back together as a group, and we'll do some collective sharing out of what these theories of change that we're all bringing into the room, into the series are. And then we'll do something really beautiful at the end, but I'm not going to spoil it, but you're going to love it, I think, personally. It's going to be a creative exercise. So that's where we're going for the next hour and a half. If you have any questions about what we're doing, you can put them in the chat. Caitlin and/or I will respond to you. Can you give me some body language right now about how you're feeling? It can be like a thumbs up. It can be like a, what's happening? Oh, okay, I see you. Great. Oh, cool. Got some heart stuff. Oh, got some flowy stuff. Love that. Great. Whew, that loosens me up just seeing y'all. Thank you for that. All right, so we're going to go into embodiment practice with Julia. Julia, you ready?
I'm ready.
Great.
That helped me too, to see everyone moving, and for me to get to move what I was feeling, because I was about to say when I came off mute, I was about to say, I'm feeling nervous. If I touch into my body, I'm noticing like a lot of excitement because, well, as Mint said, I care about this work so much. And like I right now in my little Zoom screen, I have Rochelle and I have Mint's, two of the people I love most in the world and care about so much. And just to like drop into why are we here, and listening to James Baldwin's words, and then listening to each of your words and seeing all of your faces, I just noticed like a real energy rising in my body about the importance of this, and some fear about the edginess of the importance of this, and how all of that's real in my body. And there might be many other shades of that, maybe very, very different experiences happening in all of your bodies. So as Mint said, well, oftentimes I'm actually, okay. So something that James Baldwin said really struck me that I want to take forward into this practice is, he said, they don't even know what drives them to do the violence that they do, and what a tragedy that is, and what a harm that is. And that really stuck with me, because I think so much of somatic practice, of learning to really drop in and attune to what's happening inside us, is to know what's really alive in us and what's really driving us in any given moment. And then slowly, that gives us some space for choice some space for shift, some space for transformation, even just moment to moment on a micro level. And so even those of us who, many of you in this space might have dedicated years of your life now to studying, to working towards racial justice, and still, I know I still come up against in my own work, in my movement spaces and my collaborations, the patterns I've been trained in that keep me stuck in some of the ways that Mintz and Rochelle described. And when I heard you speaking, Mintz, I thought about the restrictiveness, the binding of so many of those patterns that keep us, they almost resist gravity itself, resist like the releasing into connection toward gravity, toward each other, and how hard it is to connect from that place of restriction and of closedness and of separation. So with that, I'm going to invite us to drop into our bodies in 1 second. I just want to offer that dropping into our bodies can be more or less comfortable or safe for different people, depending on what your body's been through and what you've experienced in your lifetime or in your ancestors' lifetimes. And so this is a completely optional practice, just like all of the practices are. And you choose how deep you go. So this is also a practice for you to notice what you need and what feels okay for your own body, for your health. So I'm going to invite you in to go deep and to bring your attention into what's alive and what's happening in your body. And I see some of you finding different positions. I welcome that. And I also welcome if you need to stay really alert and keep your eyes open, or if you need to write, or if you need to move, or you need to do something, to actually stay grounded in the external reality. You're welcome to do any of that, okay? So that's all welcome here. And I will lead you to go a little deeper into noticing your body. So with that, welcome you to find whatever position is supportive for you. So maybe finding a little bit more alignment in your seat, even just kind of noticing, what kind of seated position did I settle into without maybe bringing much attention to it? I was so curious about what was happening here. Maybe I didn't really notice where my sits bones were or my feet were. So just kind of getting curious, bring some curiosity to where your body is, exploring a little what alignment might feel supportive. Yeah, I see some people rolling necks, rolling heads, and I invite you to do a little bit of that also with your eyes, exploring just the space that you're in, looking even to your sides and behind you, bringing a little bit of curiosity also outside you. Just noticing what catches your attention, what maybe shifts inside you. And then I welcome you to either lower your gaze or close your eyes, or as I said, if keeping them open feels right, doing just that. And with that, allowing the attention, the energy to drop a little lower from maybe your head space where a lot of us live a lot of our days, where we verbalize and think, below the neck into space of sensing, our body space. Noticing what shifts even just with that, even just with dropping our attention a little lower. You can notice your breath. How's your breath doing right now? Noticing its rhythm, its size, maybe its path. Noticing that it's there and has been there this whole time, even if we weren't aware of it, expanding and contracting. Noticing the dance of sensations in the rest of our body as they arise. Maybe shifts in temperature, heat, or cool. Could be coming from inside or from outside. Maybe sounds, again, could be coming from inside, a stomach digesting, bubbling, breath, heartbeat, a breeze, crickets, a child's voice. Just noticing, seeing if we can release some judgment to just notice with curiosity. Seeing if we can accept if we can't release the judgment while we notice. I invite you to bring your attention to your center of gravity, this place. I think of it as a diamond between the pubic bone, the hip bones, and the belly button. This diamond of power, center of gravity. I invite you to bring both your attention, dropping it down there if you can, if it's available to you, if it feels safe. Bringing your hands there to support that place, that tender and powerful place, if that feels supportive. And from deep here in this diamond, asking yourself, sort of sending out the radar of this question, why healing for white folks? Why do this work? Why does this matter? Why am I here to do this work? And I invite you to let those questions echo throughout your body and see if you can make some space, some opening for answers to come in unlikely forms. Maybe through images, maybe words, maybe sensations or colors. Why healing for white folks? Why does this matter? Why am I here to do this work? Why are you here to do this work? Allowing the questions to keep reverberating, noticing your breath, allowing that to support the continued processing of the answers that might be emerging. And in your own time, allow yourself to start emerging back up to the surface from the depths with whatever you've gleaned of that, your answers of your questions, and start bringing your attention back to sound and the space around you, and slowly back to us here in this group, in this shared space.
Thank you, Julia. I appreciate you a lot. And thanks to all of you for whatever that practice was for you, for your effort. And so you now get an opportunity to share with one other beautiful, radiant person. And so the way we're gonna do this is that our tech witch, Caitlin, is going to break us into pairs, into breakout rooms. Either Rochelle or Caitlin, one of these beautiful people, is sharing their screen with the instructions for this pair sharing. So I'm going to talk you through it. And there's also, I'm going to put in the chat bar the link to the actual screen, the slideshow itself, so that when you go off into your pairs, you'll have these instructions with you. This is on slide 7. So if you want to pull those up, you're welcome to. But for now, just talking you through it. So you're going to arrive in this room with one other beautiful, radiant person, and you're going to decide who's sharing first. And that person is going to take 4 whole minutes, which is actually quite a lot, but maybe might feel like nothing at all, to share whatever it was that came up for you in this practice, right? When you checked in with your center and you asked the question, why am I here? Why do I believe in this work? What came? What did you find? Could be moments, intuitions, as Julia said, images, whatever it was. It might have been expected or unexpected. If there's also, you might like to share what it felt like, what you felt in your body as you were reflecting. Were there sensations that came up, emotions, surprising, not surprising? Okay. So you're going to have 4 whole minutes, and the other radiant person, the listener, is going to just do their best to bring as much loving, open, attentive attention to support you in sharing. If you get stuck, if you're like, I'm drawing a blank, you can also just hang out in silence for a little and see if anything else comes. Or the listener, you're welcome to ask an open-ended supportive question if you want to. That's going to happen for 4 minutes. Caitlin's going to send you time reminders so you don't have to worry about timing yourself. And at the end of the first person sharing, the listener is going to do something really beautiful, which is a resonance practice. The person is just going to share what resonated for them. So those might start with, when you said blank thing, I felt sad, or I felt happy, some sort of emotion. And you're just sharing. And that isn't to then go off into your own story about why you felt that way. It's just to say, when you said this, I felt blank. It's to show something that resonated in your body. Another option could be to say, I really resonated with you when you said blank, period. Okay. So 4 minutes to share, one person, listener shares back resonances for 1 minute, and then you're going to switch. I want to share some practice support for you all. As I said, this is a time to listen and hear openly. This is really, 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 really not a time to give advice. Please, please, please don't give each other advice. That's a terrible plan, okay? So just listening, just resonating, just showing that you're here and present with what that person is offering, not coming back with like, oh, let me tell you what the actual right thing is. Don't do that. Another practice offering is to really ensure that even among your partnership, your pair, to center the voices of gender nonconforming folks, trans folks, women, femmes, and folks with any oppressed intersectional identities with whiteness, right? So folks who've shown up. It can be really easy to get into a room and cis men are just like, oh, I'll just talk first, you know? So just, that's not to say all cis men do that, but that's a pattern that can happen. So just really focusing on centering voices of folks with oppressed intersectional identities. The last thing I'll say here is to take care of yourself. We're sending you into a room with someone that we probably don't know, or we might not know, and you probably don't know. And so if there's anything that happens in that room that you don't like, you are welcome to just be like, cool, actually, I'm going to head back to the big room, and you can come find us and we'll welcome you with open arms. Okay. Great. All right, welcome back, everyone. I would love for you to just take one moment and write one word in the chat about how that was for you. How was that conversation? Anybody who wants to share anything? What was that like? Emotional, supportive, beautiful, powerful, divine in all capital letters, magical. Oh my God, these words, there are so many of them, I can't keep up. Wow. I see a heart, reflective, settling, encouraging, beautiful. Wow, thank you all. I feel uplifted by all those words. So we're going to take a quick break before we come back and do some sharing all together. So we're actually going to take 5 minutes. In those 5 minutes, you are welcome to do whatever you need to do to take care of yourself. I'm going to offer that if there was any brilliance that really meant something to you, if you want to jot that down in those 5 minutes, I would encourage that. Okay, so we'll see you back at 5:15. Take care of yourself.
The river is a healer, the river is a sage, the river knows no end and the river feels no age. The river is a leader every single day. It's living in the moment and it always finds a way. Water heal my body, water heal my soul. When I go down to the water, by the water I feel whole. The river calls me over, it's calling out my name. In the day and in the night I hear that river all the same. It's calling me over, calling out my pain. Oh, a river gathers tears just like a river gathers rain. Water heal my body, water heal my soul. When I go down to the water, by the water I feel whole. The river is a traveler, always on the go. Oh, a river never worries if it's fast or if it's slow. River, take me to where I need to go. Oh, and I will just relax and let the river flow. Water heal my body, heal my body, water heal my soul. When I go down to the water, by the water I feel whole. Water heal my body, water heal my soul. When I go down to the water, by the water I feel whole. Water heal my body, water heal my soul. When I go down to the water, by the water I feel whole. When I go down to the water, by the water I feel whole. Rise up in every way that feels right in my own soul. in my own soul. I rise up in every way. It feels right in my own soul. I rise up in every way. It feels right in my own soul. I rise up in every way. It feels right in my own soul. Rise up in every way. It feels right in my own soul. Rise up in every way. It feels right.
Thank you for the music, Rochelle. Thanks to all of you for coming on back when you're ready. So now, oh, I'm off video. Okay. So now we get to have a conversation together, noting that there are 37, at least, Zoom rooms open, Zoom boxes open. So it's going to be, you know, a conversation. A lot of people. We're going to do it. It's going to be great. And the way that we're going to do it is we're going to use these Google Slides to start. So I just put them in the chat again. There's a link. They should be available. Everybody can open them. And what I'm going to ask you to do is take a moment, looking at slides 8, 9, 10, and 11, and do some sharing. We're going to collectively gather all of our brilliance and thoughts about these questions. What is healing work for those who benefit from whiteness? Like, what does it actually entail? What is the work to do? Okay. So for example, I put in reconnecting with Earth. That's one example for me. So you can you literally just pull and drag a Post-it note out, and you can double click in it and write in it. Okay. If you have questions about this, you can write them in the chat, and Caitlin and I can support you. That's slide 8. Slide 9 is, why is healing work important for us, for those who benefit from whiteness? Slide 10 is, why is healing work important for the people in our lives? How does doing this work benefit those we care about? And then slide 11 is, why is healing work important for collective liberation? And really the real question is here, why is healing work for those who benefit from whiteness important for collective liberation? So take a moment and jot down any thoughts you have about any of those questions. You don't have to go in order. And if you can't work the slides but you have some thoughts, you can put them in the chat and we can pull them over for you. So it looks like there are 33 people on the slides, which means we're doing pretty good. Okay, there's a lot of work happening here. As you all are continuing to work, I'm going to pull us into a little conversation. So I'm going to start us heading in that direction, but feel free to keep working as you'd like to. And just finish up whatever last thought you're on. Rochelle, will you slideshow slide 8 for me? Awesome. Yes, beautiful, thank you. So I'm noticing a couple on here that have more than 1 star. And some of that encourage or invite folks who wrote those to speak a little more. So I'm hearing disrupting generational patterns, remembering my humanity. So this is, what is healing work? What is healing work for those who benefit from whiteness? What is the actual work to be done, right? So disrupting generational patterns, remembering my humanity, redistributing and sharing access to resources with my and other communities. Love all of these. I'm seeing another one with 2 stars is reconnecting with body, soul, spirit, sacredness of self and all beings. So anyone who authored any of those want to speak a little bit more about what you mean by them? You can just come off mute. Great, go for it.
Yeah, hey everyone. I wrote Remembering My Humanity. As a biracial person, I always felt like in social justice spaces that I wasn't fully human, that I was part of my ancestry. It was just not really human. And so I would hide it. I would overcompensate, deny it. But I would continually be told I wasn't really Asian by my own community. And so in time, I started to work with mixed people, but that wasn't the best fit for me either. And then when I started working with Rochelle, it was when I started to realize like, oh yeah, like I can heal all of me and not just half of me that is socially acceptable in social justice spaces. So remembering my humanity is about remembering that all of my ancestors are human beings. And when I remember that, then I am reminded that I am a human being, like completely, and not just half of me.
Thank you, Hiroki, for sharing. Really appreciate that so much. Can I ask you one follow-up question? Are there any specific practices that are meaningful for you in that work? Like specific concrete things that you do?
Yeah, definitely. Just altar building, which I'm excited. I'll share with y'all in Movement 5. Yeah, altar building. And it can be as simple as like putting a picture of your grandmother who passed away, like in a frame, putting it on like a, you know, you can have some type of beautiful cloth you have, put it like next to your bed on like a small table or anything, even a like crate, you know, and putting flowers, you know, and just having a conversation and being like, can you help me with this? Because this is too much. I can't do this alone. And yeah, when you're able to just remember like, oh yeah, like I can have a conversation with my grandmother. She was a really wonderful person and she was white and she loved me and I love her. And it just, I feel like once you can like realize you can have a relationship with the people who you knew while they were in this lifetime, you can learn in time that you can have a relationship with other ancestors who you heard of, your great grandparent or whoever. And that practice opened me up to realizing I could have a relationship with other ancestors who want to love and support me in doing, whether it's racial justice work, whether it's healing intergenerational trauma in my family, and how those two types of healing are interconnected and interdependent on each other. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Wondering if anyone else, any of the other 3 authors of those post-its that have multiple stars, disrupting generational patterns, redistributing, sharing access to resources. Where's the last one? I can't remember. Either of those 2, anybody who authored either of those want to share what you meant by that?
I can share.
Oh, okay, go ahead,
Oh,
Paul. You first.
okay, cool. I was just saying, I did the redistributing and sharing access to resources, and basically, like, I had access to wealth at a pretty young age because of like inheriting it, and so that ended up like I felt like the numbness was really there for a really long time around that, and just like having this idea of having this like access to money in a trust fund as safety, and like all of these other things that kind of other people and also like my mom and just like society in general kind of like promoted as a reality. And then I've just like been in the process of trying to redistribute almost all of, or like maybe like 80 or 90% of what I have access to in the past year, towards like people buying, like the amount that I had access to was over $1 million. So it was a really large amount. But the more that I redistributed it, the more that I realized that it was really keeping me from having these deeper relationships with people and like having these power dynamics that were unspoken. And not that like it's ever possible to totally make those power dynamics disappear, but just the fact that like I actually did have the power to shift them, along with doing that work, and the more security that I actually had, because I realized that there's so many other forms of security that are important and like more important in a lot of ways than access to money. Like just having, like I didn't have to build these like community supports that a lot of other people that I know, both white and not, with like less class access, had to build amongst themselves. And so I don't know, for me it's like I've seen like a direct correlation of, and it's been like, it's like a really direct thing for me because I have access to specific money, but I think a lot of folks around me I've kind of seen deal with that in different ways, depending on whether it's like access through their family or things like that. But yeah, I just feel like I wouldn't have started to build those kinds of community supports and like land supports and connection with plants and all of these things in such a deep way if I hadn't addressed that as like actually something that was keeping things at a distance for me.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I really appreciate you bringing that into the room. That's been a very big growing edge for me as well. Continues to be a very big growing edge for me right now. And so I really appreciate you naming that. And I also want to just name that race and class, right? Many of us know they're two distinct, racism and classism are two distinct systems of oppression, and they're obviously very linked together. And I want to acknowledge, like, all of us here feel ourselves to be adjacent to benefit from whiteness in some way, may or may not identify with having more access to resources than we need. And that I do think that whiteness, I have a real belief that one of the key poisons of whiteness is a deep down belief in scarcity. This is something that Julia and I talk about a lot. And so that there's this way that we're taught scarcity of resources, scarcity of food, scarcity of security, and even just scarcity of value, right? Like there's the only way to have a racial hierarchy of who's more valuable than who in terms of humans is to believe that there's any scarcity of human value. So scarcity is inherent, I believe it's inherently linked with whiteness, and so doing work around scarcity is super important to me, whether or not that's linked for all of us to actually having access to more material resources than we need. So I just really want to appreciate you bringing that into the room, Paul. I want to actually just check in with this person who wrote Disrupting Generational Patterns and see if you want to share anything. I think one person was about to share before Paul, or at the same time as Paul.
Hey y'all, I wrote Disrupting Generational Patterns. Doing a lot of personal work right now regarding my family of origin and understanding like what some of like the trauma and dysfunctional patterns that like my parents and their parents learned, and it's impossible to separate any of those behaviors from white supremacy and white dominance. So I think that I really appreciated, Hiroki, like what you were saying about like honoring our ancestors as individuals. I think as a white person, where both sides of my family are white, and it's tricky because half my family is Jewish, so there's like this added like complexity of like ethnicity, if you will. But it's, I think I sometimes like write off my ancestors as like being less than human and, you know, like participating in the monstrosity of white supremacy when the reality is that like folks are complex, and I truly have to believe that like folks do the best they can with what they have. And so I feel very fortunate to have access to spaces like this and to other programs that I'm in, to be able to learn from others and to deeply connect on a spiritual and interpersonal level, in a way that, you know, is going to hopefully help me do things differently than my parents did, and to be able to recognize what some of those patterns are that, like, sometimes I started doing this work like my senior year of college, and I just assumed that, like, I was always going to be dysfunctional, and that I was always going to be that my learned survival skills from a dysfunctional childhood were always going to be with me, and I'm learning healthier survival mechanisms as an adult. And I think that, like, again, like, that is incredibly tied to, like, unlearning a lot of, like, white dominant culture and white supremacy. So really appreciate this space.
Thank you, Danny. And actually, that's a really nice connection into slide 9, which is, why is healing work important for us, for those of us who benefit from whiteness? And so I'm just going to do a little bit of reading of what I'm seeing here. I'm seeing we access, so especially the ones that have multiple stars, I'm seeing we access more interesting, vibrant, alive versions of ourselves. I really identify with that. It enables us to understand who we are outside of the constriction of whiteness and white culture. I'm seeing deepening our spirits for long haul of the bigger work, allowing us to feel joy, which helps fuel the work. I love that. Oh, there are so many stars. I love it. We can't show up for anyone if we don't show up for ourselves, reconnecting to our humanity, to bring wholeness to ourselves, to connect more deeply, making our work more sustainable, to bring true connectedness to other beings without deep power dynamics. These are really beautiful. And actually, I'm going to move us past this slide, because healing work can be beneficial for us. And I think that maybe we often have more of a sense of what that might be. And so I'm going to move us into, how can healing work be important for not only us, but also for the people in our lives, and also for collective liberation. So I'm going to just read a couple more there, and then we can hear from some folks. So on slide 10, why is healing work important for the people in our lives? Healing work is community work, breaking dysfunctional patterns of relating to others. Healing allows us to show up fully with others, and actually a lot of these are connected. And I'm seeing some connections, right, of why is healing work important for us, and how is it important for the people in our lives? A lot of those things are the same even, right? Healing equals more open to connection. I'm seeing one that says, so we don't force our toxic patterns or our wounds onto those who are close to us. And I'm seeing another one that says, we stop using other people to fill the holes whiteness creates in our sense of self. I want to invite the person who wrote that one, actually the last one I just read. We stop using other people to fill the holes whiteness creates in our sense of self. Can the author of that say anything more about that?
Sure, I can try to.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think about, like, versions of myself that moved through the world like 5 or 6 years ago, before I started doing this type of work more deeply in my life, and just like how fractured my sense of myself was, and how that influenced how I moved into connection. That I think, like, one, it's in some ways the sense of scarcity, Rebecca, that you were talking about before, that I think living in a way that is, like, distant from connection, and distant to a sense of self, and distant to, like, my own, like, worthiness and aliveness and, like, courage and capacity to, like, meet my needs for myself, makes, like, every interaction feel like I have to get everything I can from this, because otherwise I'll be losing something. And so, like, trying to cultivate a sense of self that doesn't depend on extraction from other people, feels like a central piece of the work. And that can, like, it can look like I think I've experienced it looking both like demanding things of other people that it's not my place to demand of them, or that they haven't offered to me. And it can also look like collapsing into other people's expectations for me out of fear that I'll be rejected if I like inhabit myself as myself and set boundaries and name my own needs, because like I'm afraid of what will happen if there's a rupture in the relationship that comes from me like naming those things. And it's like the version of myself that believes I have a right to exist as myself in this world, and that is like in touch with what my work looks like, is like less invested in like individual relationships as the thing that keep my sense of myself or my identity afloat. And like just with entitlement being a core energy of whiteness, like that I'm entitled to like something from the people around, like just like I'm like filling up those holes so that there's not this like thing that I'm trying to like stuff other people into.
Thank you, Jojo. If that resonates with you, I wish I had done this earlier. If that resonates with you, you can show Jojo resonance with your body, right? Like, wow, yeah, thank you. It could be like spirit fingers, could be some like, oh, that is alive and true for me too. That's just an offering, because sometimes we're on Zoom. We don't know. We're just like saying stuff out into the world and we don't know how it's landing with people. So if that's resonating with you, feel free. We have a friend, Brittany Washington, who talks about it as sharing your juicy faces with each other over Zoom. So it'd be like, yes, thank you, which is how I felt when you spoke, Jojo, which is why it came to mind. So I want to bring us, actually, it's already 5:40, y'all. Can you believe it? It's already 5:40. I want to bring us, with the limited time that we have left together tonight, to slide 11. And actually, so yeah, let's do a little reading of this, and then Rochelle, I'm going to ask you to take it off, but just for now, so we can look at it together. I'm seeing it's interesting just to notice visually, there are fewer post-it notes on here, but they're longer with more text, right? So just noticing, oh, interesting. Maybe other slides it was like quicker sound bites, and this is like, what's here? What's here? Why is healing work for those of us who benefit from whiteness important for collective liberation? So let's see what's here. I'm seeing one with a bunch of stars. When we are not consistently in the process of healing, we end up causing more harm, okay? No one is free until we are all free. We are wholly dependent on each other for survival in the wake of crumbling post-capitalist systems. Masculinity plus whiteness equals deep indoctrination to violence and anger as primary responses. We can't be in community authentically if we haven't healed ourselves. And again, there are some connections here with the previous slides too. For the resilience, longevity, deep connection and mutual giving and receiving allow for limitless divine flow to come through us. The more healing happens, the way we show up shifts, and liberation will come from a place of love and empowerment. Prosperity at the cost of others is not prosperity. Collective liberation requires being in relationship with oneself and one another. Healing is central to being in relationships. And lastly, healing is central to liberation for all of us. We white folks need it deeply, and it is also an opportunity to be in healing in multiracial spaces and communities. So just going to take a couple minutes here, and actually, Rochelle, would you mind taking down the slide off of screen share for now? Thank you so much. So I want to offer an opportunity now for, if anybody feels moved to speak to this, whether you authored one of those or not, to speak a little bit to like, why? How did those of us who benefit from whiteness doing our healing work, how does that contribute to collective liberation? So it can be building off of something that you wrote or something that you heard. And the best way I've found to get into Zoom conversations with a big group is to put in the chat bar to put your name, or actually the word stack, either one. And then I'll know that you're trying to get in here. Anybody have anything you want to share? Oh, River, we're ready for you.
Hi.
Hi.
Mine was one of the ones with the star, but the way that I wrote it, it's hard for me to focus and write, and So it wasn't phrased very well, but I was just speaking to that for me, with my healing, at the core of everything, bigger than oppression, bigger than social justice, is our relationship with the divine. And I know that not everybody has this kind of practice or belief system, and I want to respect that. And even if you don't have a relationship with what you might call the divine or with spirit or source or whomever, that taking that bird's eye view, that ancestral elder view, which is a many culture lineage practice, to me allows that perspective. And things become a lot less personal when we can sort of occupy the ancestral realm. What are the ancestors seeing when they're looking down upon us, struggling day to day with, oh my God, I'm white and I'm privileged and, this and that, and I can't, I don't know how to engage in liberation. Like the ancestors are looking down at us and saying, dear loved one, it's okay. You did not create this system. This system is here to teach all of us how to be better humans, how to be more deeply connected to our purpose. And so just remembering everything is a lesson, even if it feels like there is deep, deep grief. So I hope I'm not sounding like I'm giving advice. I'm trying to just channel what feels real. But yeah, that's just what I wanted to speak today.
Thank you, River. I don't know if you can see, but you're definitely getting some resonance body language on the screen. Thank you for sharing. I'm really resonating when you say with the bigger picture. That helps me feel like more resilient to go through the hardness, whatever it is, especially in this moment when things feel so intense, right? That it's like, oh, right, okay, this is bigger than me. There's a bigger picture than this. Helps me get out of my own kind of stuckness or fear. Ernie.
Hi, everyone.
How does us in your work support collective liberation?
Well, actually, I wanted to offer a response to River. I think I really resonate with everything that you've said, specifically around ancestry, and I think ancestor work has been an important part of the healing process I've started. I don't know if anyone's familiar with John Trudell. He's an indigenous activist, Lakota. Passed away recently, unfortunately, about 4 or 5 years ago. But he said that everybody's indigenous to somewhere, and part of the speech attached to that quote is just understanding that everybody at some point in their lineage comes from some existence where we had a deep relationship with land, with each other, and at some point in our line we emerged from something all in a very similar way. And decolonizing our thinking, that was I think on slide 8. Decolonizing my thinking has been trying to understand what that life around emergence and through that early existence might have been like for my ancestral line, and understanding healing as maybe an examination of that. So River, I really appreciate everything you said, and yeah, that's kind of what came to mind when I heard you shared.
Thank you. Thank you, Ernie. Yeah. We have time for one more person. Anybody want to share? Especially if you're having that feeling in your body that you're like, oh, I have something that's really important to me, but I'm kind of scared to say it out loud because maybe people will think it's silly, or maybe I'll sound like an idiot. This is the perfect time to say that thing. You can just put your name in stack and then I'll. Why does this matter, especially for collective liberation? How does us doing this work contribute to movements for social justice and collective liberation? Yes, Zoe, we're ready for you.
I think for me, recognizing that I've been harmed by whiteness or healing is the recognition that I've been harmed, and recognizing that harm allows me to think about how and dismantle those things. It gives me a greater awareness of the pathways of oppression, even if I haven't been the one who's been oppressed, you know. And it helps give me an awareness of how not to self-replicate these pathways of harm.
Thank you, Zoe. Yeah, I think just for me to do some summarizing and pulling out of some things we saw throughout the slides, there's a piece of it that is like when I show up in the room, right? When I go to the meeting, when I join the team, when I'm trying to get involved in my social movement work, when I am showing up from a place of centeredness and wholeness, I will contribute better than if I'm showing up with all my toxic shit. Like just kind of period. There's like a very practical, logistical piece to it that's like, I will show up better. I will be more able to contribute wholly when I am centered, when I am connected to spirit, when I'm connected to my own center. And then there's another piece of it, and Rochelle, I know you have said this to me many times, and you said it at the beginning, that is, white supremacy continues because we, as those who benefit from whiteness, hold on to feelings of superiority. It is our addiction and holding on to a position of superiority that keeps white supremacy alive. Kind of period, you know? And so those of us who are really excavating that belief out of our bodies, we are contributing to a world where there is less white supremacy, that system, that ideology has less power. And the more white folks that can be doing that excavating work, bringing that belief system out of our bodies and composting it into the earth, or maybe out into the ether, that I really believe that is truly contributing strategically to collective liberation. So those are just some of my thoughts, and I'm so grateful to have gotten to facilitate this conversation. I'm going to pass it now over to Rochelle to bring us to closure, but I just want to thank you all so much for this conversation. Thank you to everybody who offered anything on the slides, everybody who spoke, everybody who witnessed. Y'all are really beautiful and bring me a lot of meaning and purpose being here in this time. Thank you. Rochelle, I'm going to pass it to you to close this out. You ready?
Thank you so much, Mince. So please stay as present as you can for the next 10 minutes, because we're actually going to be doing some collective work together before we actually like close. So take a couple of cleansing breaths. That was a lot of like exposure, a lot of taking in, a lot of integration that might be happening or continuing to happen. So remembering to breathe, remembering to move and expand our bodies, remember to notice. And the last activity we're going to do is actually write a collective poem together. And this is a poem that I hope that will carry on through the series as part of our just like work to practice working collectively. So here's what you'll be invited to do for the next 5 minutes. You'll be invited to return back to our slideshow and go to this third to last slide, second to last slide, under practicing emerging collective values. And there you'll see a prompt, which is, what are the words that remind you that you can exist more fully and completely? Someone is doing us the favor of actually like highlighting the text box. So that's where you will be entering your response in both those slides. You're invited to write phrases, words, whatever you are moved to share. And I'd like to invite us to think about like we were just filled up together. Allow your surplus, allow the electricity, allow anything else that needs to emerge from you to come onto that page. One request, please do not edit each other's words. I don't care if there's a grammar mistake or a typo. Resist the urge to edit one another's work. I will encourage you, however, to build on each other's work, right? So if you're feeling inspired by someone else's words, Go ahead and riff. Let's make some jazz. If this is not quite for you and you can't stretch to get that point, or you're just not in an emotional place to participate in that way, great, hold space for us. So let's spend the next 5 minutes witnessing, taking in. We will resend the link, drop it in there for the slideshow. And I'll be sure to read the poem before we formally close today. So take a few deep breaths, see what's alive in you, and allow the surplus to be shared on the page or to hold space. Thanks, y'all. Take a deep breath. I'm not going to be reading all 5 slides right now because I do want to honor our time together, but I will share the screen so that we can all just kind of read and take in what was shared. And I know there's a lot that we're missing at the bottom of a lot of these slides. So we'll be sure to convert this into a form that can capture all these gorgeous words. What we've been able to practice together is essentially create a time capsule. Words we can come back to, words to remember. Reminder to drink your water. Okay. So thank you so much for being in practice together in the time that we had. And thank you so much for being so present, so open, so engaged, and literally showing up. I'd like to think that what we explored today is not only about a form of harm reduction, but we're in practice about how to change the value of power itself and how we understand and relate to power fundamentally. And it's through this work, right? Through the inheritance that we all are living and surviving and some days thriving through, and thriving with, that it's going to allow us to come into the new paradigm in a different way. So I hope our time together has energized you to go through the depths. If you are into this experience, we're going to be continuing through 8 different movements that are going to be exploring everything from guilt and shame, which is next Saturday, into fear, into perfectionism and paralysis. There will be themes of grief throughout that shadow work, which are the next few movements. And then I'm really, really excited that you met a number of collaborators today who are going to lead us through the healing through the shadows portion, which will include Jojo, who's going to be leading us through nourishing ourselves to do this deep work. Julia is going to be taking us through into the somatic experience of healing the race body. Jennifer, who joined us on the call today, though was more in the background, about living into risk. Hiroki, who made some beautiful contributions, will be getting deeper into ancestral healing, which seems like we'll vibe with this group as well. And we'll be ending with our collaborator, Escala Sisk, who's going to be taking us into redefining and what that experience can be like. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for believing in this work. We hope to see you again. This particular recording will be online to the public. So if you want to do this work in more community with people you know, invite them to join us. We've designed the series to be accessible as possible, and we're going to be in conversation with you all about how to continue to make it even more accessible, to do some really, really deep work. So I will see some of you all next time around guilt and shame. I hope you're ready. We're going to be really getting into it. And deep thanks again to my co-conspirators, Rebecca, and doing the healing facilitation that you do. Julia, for doing all the embodiment and holding that you do. And Caitlin, for being the witchiest of tech witches. Thank you so much for holding the space. Y'all take care of each other and yourselves.